Welcome to this research talk on my experimental study paper titled Determining the Robustness of Privacy Enhancing De-Identification against the Re-Identification Adversary. Before I begin my talk, let me quickly introduce myself. I am Ankur Chatterjee, currently a faculty of computer science and cybersecurity in the University of Northern Kentucky at the USA. And before I start, I would like to acknowledge the contributions made towards this paper by Robert and Levi, who are my two students and also co-authors on this paper. Before I get into details of my research work, I would like to talk a little bit about the background and motivation for this particular research. So this work basically explores the area of performance evaluation when it comes to image de-identification techniques or privacy enhancements. So as seen in this slide, I have actually generalized the existing work that I've researched, which has been based on evaluating image privacy enhancements. And I've found that there have been three broad categories. And as classified here, the first category, which is probably the most common category of existing research papers that I've found, looks at performance evaluation from the perspective of the fine balance between privacy and usability. In other words, whether the identification technique which has been applied towards the images have been able to preserve the fine balance or strike a fine balance between privacy protection and the utility of the images. That means to let the surveillance or monitoring go on at the same time. This has been a very common approach, and there's been several works or existing literature on this particular category. The other category, which I've seen has had a lot of other work and interesting research, is the study based on human subjects. This one looks at the perspective of how the viewer experience matters and how the viewer kind of looks at the de-identification or the privacy enhanced images and how they actually view them. And based on their feedback, the researchers have been able to assess or have tried to evaluate the de-identification techniques. The third category, which is probably the most relevant category, especially in context of this paper, and probably the relatively new category that I've found, is based on robustness analysis of the obscuration-based de-identification techniques. This is the classification of performance evaluation in which researchers have tried to find out the effectiveness of privacy-enhancing algorithms by subjecting them to different kinds of analysis based on either threat modeling, in which they have tried to find vulnerabilities, and probably the most relevant and the newest kind is by conducting adversarial attacks through person recognition and deep learning. So, talking about the focus of this paper, what our adversarial approach has been in terms of trying to figure and do a novel performance analysis of de-identification algorithms is, or for that matter, the focus is re-identification. So before I go into talking about our novel approach, I would like to talk a little bit about person re-identification, which is a very important and sophisticated computer vision technique and has been already largely used in a number of different image processing applications, especially in computer vision, namely for object tracking or person recognition. And as seen in this particular slide, what person re-identification is basically is a technique by which you can recognize individuals across multiple non-overlapping camera views. In other words, multi-camera tracking. And it is based on trying to actually match images from these different views as seen in this particular slide by using appearance-based low-level filters. The paper that we have focused particularly for this particular research work is the work done on low-level re-identification, which is appearance-based ReID by Zhao et al. From 2014, which has been already cited in this work. Now, this particular work has actually done the attribute-based ReID in two experimental modes, namely single shot and multiple shot. And what is interesting and probably most relevant to our work is the multi-shot mode, in which a person identification is actually done by cross-validating an individual's multiple shots across either the same camera or from different camera views. So moving on, let's first look at the first of the two de-identification methods or techniques that I have tried to evaluate in this paper using our ReID-based evaluation. The first one is the Privacy Cam DeID, which is actually based on my work with Dr. Terry Bolt from 2007, a paper that I published in IEEE CVPR. And as you can see in this particular slide, these pictures are taken from the CUHK01 dataset. In other words, the City University of Hong Kong dataset, which is a very popular dataset and is referred to in the paper that I already mentioned by Zhao et al. From 2014. So basically, I've applied my Privacy Cam filter, which is the de-identification technique I've used on the CUHK01 images as seen over here. Now, again, for the sake of time constraints, I probably won't be going into delving too much details about the Privacy Cam de-identification technique. But again, that paper is cited there and you can find details on this technique there. But coming back to the main focus and what I would like to cover here is in terms of how I'm actually approaching the performance evaluation of this Privacy Cam DeID. So the next slide talks about my first research experiment in which I basically pit the Privacy Cam de-identification against Zhao et al.'s 2014 re-identification technique. Namely, my research question, which I'm trying to focus and answer here, is that can that re-identification algorithm succeed against the Privacy Cam based or applied images from the CUHK01 dataset? Or in other words, can the performance analysis of ReID, when it's done against my Privacy Cam de-identification technique or de-identified images of the CUHK01 dataset, can that help determine the robustness of the Privacy Cam and help evaluate the effectiveness of the Privacy Cam to resist re-identification? So I would like to mention over here quickly, as seen in this slide, there are two versions of this Privacy Cam de-identification model that I've used in this experiment, which is based on the region of interest or the ROI. The first one is where the face obscuration is applied. That means the privacy ROI is the face. And the other one is where the foreground obscuration is applied, where the privacy ROI is the foreground. And what we've also tried to see as part of like another second research question is whether we can compare these two different versions of the Privacy Cam de-identification model using our ReID validation technique. So our approach in very short or in summarized form is that we first apply these two Privacy Cam de-identification versions on the CUHK01 images, and we get the privacy enhanced images as a result. And on those privacy enhanced images, or in other words, the DeID images, we run Zhao et al.'s re-identification algorithm from 2014. And then we observe the results obtained in the form of the ReID performance. So in the next slide, we're going to see the overall summarized results from this first Privacy Cam versus ReID experiment. So as you can see in this table, and what is noticeable is that if you see what the ReID performance looks like in terms of the ReID rank 1 matching rate, especially with the multi-shot cross view, which is probably the most relevant and the most important one in the context of this particular work, we see that without the de-identification, the ReID matching rate is between 65% to 71%. That means at an average of about 68% success. And that actually drops down to a success rate of 48% to 56%, again in that multi-shot cross view, when we use the face obscuration privacy cam version on the CUHK01 dataset images. So basically, we see that there is a case where the face obscuration privacy cam DeID is able to resist the re-identification rate to a certain extent when it's applied in this experiment. But what is even more noticeable is that if we go to the other version of the privacy cam DeID, which is the foreground obscuration based de-identification, then we find that the ReID rank 1 matching rate further drops down to 29% to 33%, which is an average of about 31% success rate. And that is actually a significant decrease in the re-identification success. And what these observations sort of tell us and overall summarize is that face obscuration based privacy cam DeID model is obviously outperformed by the foreground obscuration based privacy cam DeID model, which is kind of intuitive. But what is important here is that we can see that in terms of the results clearly when we use this proposed ReID based validation approach. And what is also worth noticing is that both the privacy cam DeID techniques do manage to bring down the ReID success rate, which actually suggests, and that is what we are trying to find in this novel research work, is that the ReID based observation in terms of its success rate and its performance analysis can actually lead us or help us to understand whether the given re-identification or the de-identification technique under question is actually effective or not. So in order to further gather research results from our preliminary research in this regard, we've also looked into another de-identification model, which is a work of mine from 2016. This model is called privacy extension or privacy cam extension. So it's a modified version of the previous original privacy cam that I just discussed. This actually applies multi-resolution. That means discrete wavelet transforms in terms of its processing. And as seen in the pictures, just like we saw in the earlier pictures, I'm again using the CUHK01 dataset images from Zhao et al.'s 2014 work. And I've applied the privacy cam extension filter on this one. And as you can see in these images, we can see how the privacy enhancement images look like. Again, for the sake of time and also because of our constraints, I'm not going to go into details about the privacy cam extension technique or the model there. Again, that is cited in our paper, and you can find details on this work in our final IEEE paper when it gets published. But for the sake of moving on and trying to focus on understanding this particular research experiment with the privacy cam extension after the original privacy cam, let me point out to the research questions in this case. So just like the previous case, this is a ReID versus privacy cam extension experiment, which is experiment 2, as I'm mentioning over here. And this experiment, just like the first experiment, is trying to see if ReID can be successful against the privacy cam extension de-identified images when it comes to the CUHK01 data set. And in other words, if we can, just like in the first experiment, see the performance analysis of ReID against this privacy cam extension. Again, similarly to the previous case, there are 2 versions of the privacy cam extension which comes into play here. And I would like to point out that these 2 versions are based on the resolution level. So the first one actually goes down resolution level 2, which is based again on the wavelet transformation, which has been applied. And the second one looks into further down in terms of wavelet transform resolution level, which goes up to resolution level 4. And what is noticeable is that for both these different 2 versions, a privacy cam extension. The privacy ROI is the foreground. Now, what we are also interested to find out is that using this ReID-based validation approach, can we also compare the performance of the different resolution versions of this multi-resolution privacy cam extension technique. So again, just like the previous experiment, our technique is we apply the two different versions of the privacy cam extension on the COHK01 images. So we obtain the privacy enhanced images, and then we run Zhao et al.'s 2014 ReID algorithm on these DeID images. And then we observe the results obtained in the form of the ReID performance, that is the CMC curve. So in the next slide, we're going to look at the summarized results from this second experiment, which is namely the ReID versus privacy cam extension. So just like the first experiment, and even more so, we actually notice over here that without the application of the de-identification, we observe that the ReID rank 1 match rate is between 56% to 63%. That means an average of about close to 59%. But if we apply the original privacy cam privacy filter or the de-identification techniques with the foreground obscuration, then this ReID rank 1 matching rate drops between 28% to 30%, which is an average of about 29%. And again, this is the multi-shot cross view, which is of most interest to us. But now the interesting results, which you can see over here, is that with the privacy cam extension de-identification technique, and at the resolution level 2, we actually achieve further decrease in the re-identification success rate. That means the re-identification rank 1 matching rate drops to 16% to 20%. Between that means an average about 18% at the resolution level 2, which is significant. And even further, if we go down into the resolution level 4 on the privacy cam extension DeID version, we see that the multi-shot cross view or the ReID 1 rank 1 matching rate in the cross view drops down to 4% to 10%, which is single digit figures. And that means an average of about 7%, which is significant. And what this results show in terms of observations to us, it is quite clear that this ReID-based validation approach actually managed to show that the privacy cam extension model outperforms in terms of effectiveness when it comes to de-identification against the original privacy cam version. And what is also interesting within the privacy cam extension model, the privacy cam extension version, which is the resolution level 2, is again less effective comparatively to the resolution level 4. And what is interesting is that we, for the first time, notice there is a significant, compared to the first experiment, there's a significant drop in the ReID performance, the ReID success rate. Again, that is the ReID rank 1 matching rate over here. So what is interesting overall in this research, in terms of our contributions, this is, like I mentioned, a first of its kind new validation method which evaluates image de-identification techniques using the re-identification, which is unprecedented and has not been done before. And what is also interesting is that this is a novel technique by which we're showing how de-identification method can actually pose as an adversary, and actually we can see how we can determine the effectiveness of a de-identification or a privacy enhancement technique by analyzing its impact on the ReID performance. Now, of course, this is based on our preliminary results and our work, so there's still a lot of possibilities in terms of looking ahead in the future and future scope of work as listed over here. We would definitely like to carry on and extend this work by evaluating other kinds of de-identification techniques. There's a lot of different privacy enhancement techniques when it comes to image de-identification. We would like to sort of try to evaluate more of these techniques using our ReID validation technique. We'd also like to look at other re-identification algorithms beyond Zhao et al.'s 2014 paper, which is the basis for this particular research work. And of course, one of the limitations we currently have faced in this research is that when we have run our ReID experiments, we have seen that it's very time consuming, and even to actually run it on a partial data set of the COHK01 images, it takes hours for that matter. So we would like to look into usage of GPU and other powerful modern computing resources to see if we can actually reduce the time consumption or, the whole time which is taken right now for running one single instance of re-identification experiment. So that is kind of future work for us. So on that note, I would like to end this talk by citing some of these references. Again, these are selected references from what I just presented in this paper.